The man you marry, the man you date. Hot, handsome. The man you need versus the man you want. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Always Watching. Today we're discussing The Materialists, and I have mixed feelings about this film. Briefly, the film follows Lucy, a matchmaker torn between her old love John, played by Chris Evans, and a potential new love, Harry, played by Pedro Pascal. And I never wanted to love a movie more. However, I feel like it had more ideas than it was able to execute. And I think this film needed a little bit more time in the writer's room. It tries to split its time between Lucy as a matchmaker and also juggle Lucy's very chaotic love life. In doing so, it attempts to tackle a number of very big questions. The first being, is love essential for marriage? To what extent should money influence the decision to marry someone? And finally, can someone's true value be determined by how much money they make? Although it touches on all of these questions, it rarely goes beneath the surface. Now, starting with what I did like, the film does a great job of depicting today's ruthless dating world and the way we have come to commodify ourselves. Even in a world driven by material success, the desire to find love remains strong. You don't actually need money to be in love with someone. However, you do need money to get married. It's not that difficult to find someone you're economically and socially aligned with. However, people don't want just that. People want to be happy. And happiness is very much rooted in finding love. And the movie tries to unpack this. What is love? What does love look like? What are these intangible qualities that bind two people together? Lucy describes the ideal partner as a grave buddy, someone who will stay with you at your lowest and love you at your weakest. And I do think the film raises these very profound questions sincerely. However, it falls short of actually offering a meaningful answer. It presents the dilemma incredibly thoughtfully, yet it never articulates a compelling response. The dating scene is incredibly competitive. People's standards have changed. Finding someone that you are spiritually and materially aligned with is incredibly difficult because it's entirely subjective. It takes a level of self-awareness and deep understanding of oneself to know what would genuinely make you feel whole. The movie tries to pin down what it means by love through Lucy's character, and this is where the film's commentary falls apart. The way we get to know Lucy is through her job as a matchmaker. What makes her an exceptional matchmaker is her ability to identify what each of her clients value, whether it's more material or more emotional. She calls it math. However, when she meets Harry, a dating unicorn, she's pretty much at a loss for words. This man has it all. He's good looking, he has amazing style, ideal income, ideal height, ideal weight, ideal everything. And the movie is so frustrating because everything is told to us through dialogue. However, what is being discussed is incredibly thoughtful and compelling. Lucy's dates with Harry are exceptional. They are not only well planned, through each date they find out something new about one another. And I wish the film spent more time developing Lucy and Harry's relationship. Their whole relationship feels like a whirlwind, which in theory is a very compelling approach. But in execution, it makes a lot of their conversations feel very flat and emotionless. I felt like there was a noticeable disconnect between the dialogue and how the actors were delivering this dialogue. And I suspect this was meant to reflect the awkwardness of the dating world and give the film a sense of realism. However, because we don't actually spend enough time with them, it is hard to emotionally connect with what the film was trying to convey. Lucy's time with Harry is in such contrast to her time with John, her ex-boyfriend. And this is where the movie really needed to do more work. I never doubted that Lucy would end up with John, played by Chris Evans. The story's lack of tension was really frustrating because there was just nothing to anticipate. In the end, it really did feel like Harry was underutilized and underappreciated. In terms of John, the only thing we ever find out about their relationship is that they dated for 5 years, and the reason they broke up is because of money. There is this one very random flashback in the film, and this is the only insight we get into their relationship. And it involves Lucy and John rushing to their reservation at this fancy restaurant. They're rushing because they're late, a situation that could have been avoided if John just left his rehearsal early. And this scene doesn't really feel like it's about money, it's more about priorities. And this raises a bigger question. Did they break up because of financial strain? Or because they had gotten so used to each other that they no longer have the same priorities anymore? Based on the information the film provides, I'm not really convinced that Lucy's perception of love is very mature. So much of this film is about math, like how your past very much dictates your future. Like if you were born poor, you will probably marry someone who was also born poor. Your material reality very much dictates the type of people you will end up with. In one of the film's standout scenes, Lucy breaks down her perceived value to Harry, reducing herself to debt and a modest income in a high-cost city. And this is an incredibly vulnerable moment, and one of the few times we get any insight into Lucy's mindset and how she measures her worth based on her material limitations. And the way Harry responds was perfect. He reminds her that there's a lot of intangible qualities about a person that often cannot be measured. He goes on to rightfully highlight that a lot of these intangible qualities are actually overlooked by most people and are far more meaningful in determining the compatibility between two people. And watching this scene, I couldn't help but wonder if the movie was completely miscast. Lucy, like, I love Dakota Johnson, but she just does not come across as someone that would be struggling in this dating market, especially in a place like New York City, which there is a conversation to be had about whether or not New York is a viable location for these types of stories anymore. High-earning men like Harry are not really concerned about how much a woman makes. Now, her debt might be a bigger issue if she weren't as attractive. And the reality is, Harry is only a unicorn if you don't look like Lucy. The way she broke down her value to him and the way he responded really does suggest her idea of love is extremely limited. Or at least her self-worth is limited. At one point we learned that Lucy doesn't have a passport, and so what I understood was she's never actually left New York, or she hasn't really traveled all that much. Her world is extremely small and tightly contained. This makes her decision to go back to her ex a little bit more puzzling. And it raises questions. Is her decision to pick John really love, fear of change, or simply the comfort of familiarity? I also don't like how the film appears to reduce Harry to his material worth. Having a lot of money doesn't automatically mean you're materialistic. And I think what I found frustrating about the film is the way that Harry constantly had to prove himself to Lucy. His intentions and his character were constantly being questioned, despite his consistency. Like, yes, he does like you. What I found quite remarkable about the film is how there's really no difference between John and Harry, aside from their income. Neither character really cares about Lucy's money. They are just both genuinely good people who want the best for her. And one important point the film makes very well is that you can't really judge an individual's worth based on how much money they make. Every time I looked at John, he reminded me of that song, Freed from Desire. I don't know if you all know it. It's like, it kind of goes, I think, my love's got no money, but he has his strong beliefs. He has no power, but he has his strong beliefs. He has no fame, but he has his strong beliefs. He's got no money, but he has his strong beliefs. Like, everything about John, he was so self-assured. And more so, I think the movie makes a very good point in saying your work, like the amount of money you make from your work does not determine its value. There are plenty of people that make money and they hate what they do. I mean, and their work is meaningless. They don't really do much of anything. I don't think Lucy loved her work as much as John, and this is something that John clocks, because John is an actor and he seems very content in his world, and so does Harry. And I think the more unsettled you are with your work, or the less you know about yourself, the more these material items become very important to you, because they give you the appearance of having purpose or the appearance of having success. It kind of makes up for that internal failure. Now, assuming she did love her job, it didn't appear that her ex really cared for it. I mean, there's one conversation where she's trying to express her frustration regarding an incident with a client, and he kind of comments like, listen, you don't work for Boeing, you don't work for Shell, it's just dating. And this is the only insight we get into how he sees her work. And so we know that Lucy used to be an actress, and it seems like she gave up on that dream. And maybe some part of him thinks that she settled for being a matchmaker. Like, you do get the sense that John does not really see the value in her work the same way Harry does. And that could be because Lucy doesn't really see the value in it either. And so much of this film isn't just what we value in other people, but what we value in ourselves and how we measure ourselves against other people. Value is extremely subjective, but money is not. Money provides access to more things, but not necessarily better quality things. And I wish the film stressed this point more through these matchmaking scenes. People pay Lucy's agency to connect with high-value individuals. Sadly, someone's willingness to pay for a service does not equate their decency or their value. In addition, no amount of money can buy you respect. If someone doesn't like you, they don't like you. I mean, no amount of money is going to change their mind. And some of the most disgruntled people in the dating market are often the most successful because money, unfortunately, does not buy you a personality. And the film attempts to explore these ideas through one of Lucy's clients, Sophie. But this character is so underdeveloped and extremely two-dimensional. From the moment we meet Sophie, it's very clear to see why she will end up alone. And to be honest, there was just something very unsettling about her character. I felt like she needed therapy, not a matchmaker. And I feel like sometimes people use dating as a form of therapy. They get into the habit of going on these dates and it just becomes a part of their routine. Before you spend time with other people, maybe spend time with yourself. Before you judge other people, maybe judge yourself. Would you want to spend time with you? And if you pause, then maybe stop dating. Sophie is introduced right at the beginning of the film. And so I assumed that she would be our entry point into the modern dating scene. She abruptly disappears, and the only other time we hear from her is when she's assaulted. And we're not really even sure it's the same character because we haven't seen her for so long. And the incident feels very random and jarring rather than impactful. And I feel like the Sophie storyline is what made the film unforgivable. There was no reason to put this in here. This is such a serious topic and it was handled incredibly poorly. Not only is Sophie assaulted, but she rehires Lucy as a matchmaker at the end of the film, which for me that makes no sense. Lucy matched Sophie with someone she believed would tolerate her, in other words, her worst possible option, and in doing so, put her client in a very dangerous situation, and both of them understood this. Now, even if they reconciled at the end, I just don't see a scenario in which you would pay that matchmaker ever again or even really want to see them. Sophie's reappearance at the end of the film was just a plot device for Lucy and John to solidify their relationship. I don't like that Sophie was a means to an end because this was a very serious topic that actually needed its own time and it never really had it. Part of the reason that people pay matchmaking services is because the client assumes that these matches have already been vetted. This storyline shows that money doesn't guarantee better options or even safer experiences. Sophie assumes that Lucy's agency has a roster of high-quality men simply based on the fact that they are paying for the service. And this default assumption about the decency of folks who use this service is incredibly dangerous. I felt the film's tone was incredibly inconsistent. There are moments where it's super funny and charming, especially when she's vetting different clients and they're talking about their requirements for a spouse. This is when it genuinely felt funny and uplifting. And then you have this storyline about assault. There are just so many things going on and it feels very patchy. And so for the duration of the film, you're either super confused because you feel like you missed something, super bored because you don't really care what's happening, and it's rarely engaging. I think the film opens up Lucy's character for being unfairly accused of being too money-oriented. For Lucy, money isn't just about wealth, it's about stability and this idea of being valued. What she seemed to resent about John wasn't so much his financial situation, in my opinion, but his lack of consistent effort. She wanted to feel appreciated, seen, and prioritized, but he was too busy with his career. And the title of this film hints at this dilemma. Money is definitely an important factor when it comes to relationships and marriage. How important that is varies from person to person. From what we see of their interactions, Lucy clearly respects John. She roots for him. She goes to his shows. She notes his progress. And more importantly, and this is what makes the film unique, is that she never compares him to Harry. Harry and John don't seem to care about each other. They're not fazed. They're not bothered. And they kind of give her the space to make the right decision, which I think shows such a level of maturity in these two men. There is absolutely no sense of competition between them. They are from totally different worlds in terms of career and in terms of interest. Yet at their core, they're clearly decent, kind-hearted people. What both Harry and John struggle with is aligning their inner worth to their material reality. Harry often downplays his wealth, and that's something else I really loved about his character. He often tries to put her on a pedestal, and he never makes it seem like he's going out of his way or he's being bothered. And in my opinion, Harry was spiritually and materially compatible with Lucy. The way Harry expresses why he values her, for me, was enough to choose him. He's not choosing her because she's an ideal partner on paper. He's choosing her because he recognizes that a lot of her intangible traits actually complement and exceed his own. And I feel like Harry displayed a level of maturity that is hard to find and even harder to appreciate. The love he offers, for me, felt a lot more mature than the one she had with John, which to me, based on what the movie presented, was rooted in familiarity. Harry's departure from Lucy's life was one of the most disappointing aspects of the film. Like, he just goes away. We are told at one point that he had height surgery, and this feels like a comedic gag and not so much a meaningful plot device. And I'm not really sure why this conversation came up now, because they had been together for some time, so she definitely noticed the giant scars on his legs. So it didn't really make sense for them to be having this conversation just before traveling to Iceland. Prior to this conversation, Lucy finds a ring in Harry's suitcase, and it feels like the reason she broke up with him is because she didn't really want to commit to him. And it feels more like cold feet, like looking for a way out. And the movie really struggles to convince its audience that Lucy chose John because she loved him. This is where I have an issue. Lucy appears to be someone trapped in her own bubble, and when given the opportunity to flee that bubble, she decides to stay in it. Now, to be clear, there is nothing wrong with John. He's a genuinely good guy, and he seems equally compatible for Lucy. And it's very clear that Lucy's perspective about money has changed and greatly shifted. We're just not really sure what triggered that shift. The film gestures at a lot of these huge transformations happening in Lucy's internal world, but they're not really explored adequately. What about John makes him a better grave buddy than Harry? Where does this sense of lifelong commitment even come from? I mean, they were together for 5 years. What happened? We're told it's love, and the movie is very insistent that Lucy loved John, but it doesn't really explain what it means by love in this context. One of the things I appreciated about John and Lucy's relationship is that it never felt like Lucy was down bad. When she goes back to John, he's just there waiting for her, and it feels like a safe return for her. And this question of what makes them perfect for each other is unclear. The pacing of the film following Harry's departure is very erratic. The whole movie builds up to this grand conversation between Lucy and John, and although it's beautiful, I felt nothing. And to be honest, I was just as tired and confused as John. Like, sometimes watching this film, I felt like a scientist where I could appreciate all the technical aspects of the film. I thought the dialogue was beautiful, but there was such an emotional disconnect. I mean, it felt flat. The movie circles back to an image of the first humans who ever got married, an idea that Lucy returns to often. She wonders what made this first couple perfect for each other. Was it because he was a great hunter-gatherer? Or was it something deeper, something more intangible that went beyond survival and practicality? In its own very extreme way, I think what the movie is trying to communicate, not very well, is that real love requires bravery. In the West, people are more educated, financially stable, and you would think, given all our advancements, that people would have moved past a lot of these materialistic requirements. But in so many ways, we've actually gotten more primal in our expectations. It's no longer enough to find someone who can provide. Now we want someone who can hunt, gather, conquer, dominate, and work out in the process. I think where the movie really loses commentary is this conversation between love, money, and marriage, because historically, marriage has always been about stability, not so much emotional well-being. Ideally, people want to marry above their class, not below it. So Lucy's apprehensions are extremely valid if she's considering John for marriage. Now that many of us can survive independently, especially in the West, how does that change the types of people we choose and also the types of communities we can form? We definitely have more power than we did before. So then why is it that people feel lost despite having so many options available? And I think watching Lucy, she is relatable in that if you don't know your value, you're not really going to be able to select someone who recognizes yours. Who was that influencer that said value, value?
Value, value. Value, value. Take that in. Just repeat it to yourself until it makes.
Now, whether our concept of marriage needs to be reimagined to fit modern times, that's a different question entirely. However, the movie does make one thing clear. Our growing materialism is affecting our spiritual well-being. We have become overly reliant on apps and matchmakers to organize our lives and curate our experiences. And as a result, we often feel very disconnected or excluded. And there is an age-old saying, money cannot buy happiness, and money cannot buy love. Something that really struck me about Lucy's clients was their entitlement. I mean, no one is owed a spouse or a partner. And I do think the percentage of those who are happily married is very slim and will likely get even slimmer in the future. The movie never mentions happiness, it just discusses love, but these two things are very much connected, and neither of them have to do with material items. Now, it's sad to say, but romantic love is not guaranteed. I know they say there's someone for everyone, but I honestly disagree. I think ultimately watching John and Lucy come together, it really comes down to priorities. Are you willing to commit to something beyond yourself? And what would that level of commitment require from you and the other person? One of the standout scenes in the film is when Lucy is discussing people. She says, people are people are people are people. Like, people come as they are, not as you want them to be, unless you're Harry. At one point, Lucy mentions that love is a risk. And weirdly enough, I actually think picking Harry would have been the real risk in going on that trip to Iceland. It would have forced her to confront all these insecurities she's been burying for so long. And it feels like with John, she can remain comfortably submerged in them. And I found it fascinating that neither Harry and John really tied their self-worth to how much money they made in the same way Lucy did. And it's no longer just about attracting our partner. Our obsession with money has become out of hand. There is this huge sense of entitlement regarding money, especially access to other people's money. Like, on a side note, this whole culture of being flown out in the US is insane. This used to be called human trafficking. I mean, people are basically self-trafficking at this point. Like, none of it really makes any sense. The idea that you would give your passport number to a stranger, that's insane to me. There are some people that now expect their date to pay for their outfit. Otherwise, they're not showing up on the date. I don't know where the audacity comes from. When you read things like this, you wonder, are people looking for a husband or a father? Like, it is horrific out there. The idea that I won't even get dressed unless you give me clothes to meet you it's like, and the whole point of a lot of these insane gestures is to satisfy the ego. I think one of my favorite scenes in the film is when Lucy just straight up tells Harry she makes $80K, and he's kind of startled because people don't really offer up this information because they're ashamed of their work, or they're ashamed of the amount of money they make. So they often overcompensate with lifestyle or just putting the burden on someone else. In a strange way, I think Lucy, going back to John, really does illustrate the way the outside world has come to infiltrate our standards and corrupt it. From what I saw of their interactions, they were actually a very solid couple. And maybe with regards to Harry, again, I'm giving this movie a lot of commentaries, but it's very hard to pin down. You can have a lot of potential soulmates. I don't believe there's just one person for everyone. However, some people be missing out on all of them. And I think Lucy coming back to John is a recognition that she is with the right person, and a lot of this pressure being put on them as a couple really has nothing to do with them. Now, did the film explore any of these commentaries? Not really. Did it make an honest effort to? Yes. And I think there's a huge disconnect again. Like, I think the film was so preoccupied with questions and not so much with story. And in that way, it was lost in itself. It tried to ask too many questions through too many characters. And in the end, it felt scattered, and it ultimately said very little at all. And that's how the movie ends. I did like the credits scene because, again, it's this idea that love can really expand your worldview. And I think this speaks to the ambition of the film. And so I give it an A for effort. And so if you've seen it, please let me know. And until next time.